Hey there, Chris from Steading here today talking about how I think I got scammed buying asparagus crowns. Now, this is a little bit of clickbait, but the point I want to make is that I bought crowns to shortcut the process of getting to a harvest, and the more I read, the more I think that that's actually not in any way, shape or form going to be the case. Let me introduce my asparagus garden first and just tell you what I've got in here, and then I'll go into the details of kind of where I think this is a little bit of confusing advice that I'm seeing so commonly online. I've got my 2 crowns over the back here, 3-year-old crowns that I bought from someone on eBay because here in Australia the options were quite limited that I could see of where to buy them. I may have just been a bit late in the season, so that's fair enough. I've got one small green plant here in the corner which is doing exceptionally well, very, very well indeed. I've got a purple asparagus over in that corner there, which as soon as I saw it I was like, I have to have one of those, that'll be a great addition. And then I've actually got another plant over here which I only put in a week ago, which was a very recent addition because I was at the nursery and I saw basically a pot like this with obviously the asparagus fern growing out of it, and it was totally root bound. The whole pot was just root, and while there was some fresh root growth there, to be honest, I wasn't sure how that would survive, and so I mainly bought that because I felt like I was saving that plant, which may be totally delusional, but that's how I've now got basically the 5 asparagus plants in the garden. Now, I bought the asparagus crowns and there was a bit of focus on that for me because online everyone says buy the asparagus crowns, it's going to shortcut you getting to a harvest. You're going to be getting your harvest of the asparagus spears really, really quickly, and that sounded amazing. Now, when I looked into it, obviously the advice was in the first year after planting, you allow your spears to develop into these fronds. And so while you might be used to seeing asparagus in the shops that look like the spear, and I'll do a close-up shot of one that I've got growing over here, in actual fact what those spears eventually develop into is these big ferns, which are what support the plant and keep it alive and obviously allow it to produce the spears that we eat. So for the first year, you just allow all of your spears to turn into your fern fronds and you allow the plant to establish itself, which not too much of an issue. The problem arises is when I looked at the advice for the second year, they said, oh, you know, maybe harvest for a week or 2 at most, and then leave the plant again. So at year 2, the recommendation for the harvest seems to be do almost no harvesting at all. And in year 3, they say, well, that's when you're going to get your full harvest. Now, the advantage of the crowns, from what I was told, over these plants which are obviously grown from seed, is that you're not having to wait 3 years. However, the recommendation for the seed-grown plants is they will be harvestable in 3 years. So I'm not really seeing any difference between these 2 options. I actually had a bit of a funny anecdote. My aunt was telling us a couple of years ago how she'd bought asparagus and obviously she'd planted it the first year, not realizing that this is a long-term plant. You know, I think they can last 20 years. And so it hadn't really done well, so she'd pulled it out. And then it came to the realization that these are something you need to get in the ground and the crop comes in a couple of years' time. And since then, she's had great success. But, you know, it's very easy to have that kind of situation because I will be honest, sometimes kind of the information that gets provided with these plants is not the most helpful. So it's easy to make mistakes like that. So for me, I wanted asparagus because number 1, I love asparagus. And number 2, it being a long-term crop, it sounded just like an amazing little addition to the garden that was going to be there. Obviously an upfront investment because you're not going to be getting a crop out of it immediately, but something that down the track is going to be giving you a really awesome vegetable to add to your meals. The big thing that is said is do not grab or do not harvest your spears in that first year because the plant needs all of that strength, all of the nutrients, everything like that to grow as strong as possible. And then you let it do that. And then down the line, you're going to get much better crops, obviously. And if you over harvest your asparagus, apparently you can pretty much just kill it, which is something you don't want because, as I said, if this is something that lasts 10 or 20 years, killing it would be really, really bad because it's a big time investment. I put it in one of my better garden beds because, again, I did not want to have to move this. One interesting thing that I did see was the recommendation that you get them in their permanent location after 2 years. So maybe you grow them somewhere else, and then when you're ready, you move your crowns into that permanent location, which hopefully this will be for me. And from there, obviously, you're not going to be moving them. You're going to be really taking care of them. So let's talk the crowns first. As you can hopefully see here, I've got my 2 crowns. They are spaced about 1/2 meter apart. I put these in as my very first additions to basically my little asparagus garden here, which only has asparagus and some tomato plants in it, because I think, if I read right, the tomato is a decent companion plant for your asparagus, and so that's what I went with. I probably wouldn't do that again because the tomato went absolutely gangbusters with lots of growth and not a lot of fruit. But as far as kind of the success of my crowns, they came up quite well. As far as what we're seeing here, this 1, 2, 4, 6 decent kind of fern branches out of my little crown here. It's going quite well. When these first got going, I actually had 3 or 4 asparagus spears come up out of the ground, looking really, really healthy. But in actual fact, from these 2 crowns, only one really took off at the start, and then the plant did thicken out. And I've actually got quite a bit of support here to try and hold these up, because particularly when they get wet or when it gets really windy, they do have a tendency to blow over. And obviously I'm trying to keep these in tip-top condition. There have been some pests, normally just some, basically some little caterpillars that have been in here and had a little bit of a nibble. But because these, as far as I'm concerned, are looking pretty healthy, and I hope I'm right on that one, basically I've just left them as is. I've given them a good bit of basically liquid fertilizer every now and then, every couple of weeks. I've made sure to keep them watered, but I really haven't done all that much. And so the one here behind me, as with the other one, we've got, 5 big fronds coming up out of the crown, and these are quite tall. So I'd say these are a good meter, 1.2 meters, which is probably 4 or 5 feet. And so they have gotten to a decent size. Now, hopefully you can see this guy here, and I have attempted to basically get him staked up a little bit more, just to keep the branches up, because when it rains, obviously again they get sodden. The fronds on this smaller asparagus is a little bit less strong. They've got much smaller branches or kind of spears that the fronds have grown off, and as a result they do need a little bit more support. But to be honest, this thing is going crazy, and it's growing outside of kind of the supports that I put up for it really, really well. Undoubtedly, the most special of my asparagus is this one here, which is my purple asparagus. And I haven't done the best job in staking that one up either. You can see all of these branches here have actually kind of grown out of the side from when I originally staked it into the ground. And what's special is it's a purple asparagus. So it's just a little bit different than the rest, which as far as I'm concerned, are just going to be a green asparagus. And I guess it doesn't really matter. It's presentation on your plate kind of thing as far as I know. But it does make this one here a little bit special. This was also a seedling. As you can see, it's probably grown to a good, it'd be nearing a meter, maybe 80 centimeters. So, just over 3 foot. But it's going surprisingly well. And while it does not have the kind of those thick spears or branches with the frond growth on them, it has significantly more of these little spears growing. And really, I think looking at the plants, it seems like this would be collecting just as much, photosynthesis and nutrients and stuff as the crowns I put in, because there's not really a lot of difference between the amount of really foliage these have between the smaller seedlings, which are much denser but a little bit shorter and a lot more kind of branches on them, as opposed to those much taller but much sparser crowns. Now, undoubtedly the most interesting of my purchases was this one here, which was the pot-bound asparagus from a nursery in a pretty dilapidated state. I got it in the ground. I did kind of try and get the roots out just a little bit, but there's no doubt that there is a big pot-shaped root somewhere in there, and it went gangbusters. It grew so quickly, and I guess there is an argument to be made to say that this is probably just quite a well-established crown, certainly when you look at just how root-bound it was in quite a large pot, but it's done really, really well. It, in fact, did not have the spears, like the nice, very edible-looking spears that my two crowns did have and that I resisted eating. This one had these smaller spears, which obviously went frondy very, very quickly. However, in reality, this has grown at least as tall as the two crowns. It may even be taller. So as far as kind of like the pricing difference between these, I think the two crowns cost me $30 delivered, so let's say $15 each. This guy here was $10, and my two seedlings were $5 or $6 each. It's not going to break the bank, I don't think. However, I probably could have, if I was just a little bit more patient, just put in the seedlings and maybe put in, 6 or perhaps even 8 into this bed if I really wanted to squeeze them in. Not that I'm saying that's a good idea. And I will say that, honestly, I'm leaning towards Jack's advice, where he basically just said, just put the seedlings in. There's not that much of an advantage. I have been a little bit slack in not trimming these off, and I've got to make sure I don't trim off the new ones or damage the new ones. Ooh. So these are the old growth, and I did just trim off a fern, which I probably shouldn't have because it was still alive. You can see that's the green one there, but I'm going to try and get rid of the old growth. That one is dead-ish. Still got a fair bit of green on it. And this one here is still alive, kinda. And I don't know if you can see here, but hopefully you can. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm losing my ability to count here in real time. Yeah, we've got 5 new spears coming up. Those are going to turn into fronds. Those do not look like asparagus spears. That one does kind of, but the rest are a little bit on the thin side. So obviously, because this is a seedling, we're going to allow it to just keep growing. We're not going to harvest. We wouldn't even think about harvesting. That's in contrast to one of the crowns, which actually has real life spears growing on it. Okay, so I'm back in the corner with my other regular green seedling. I'm going to cut this frond off, and certainly the advice with the fronds is to get rid of them somewhere, not even in your mulch, because apparently there's a beetle that'll come and eat your asparagus and make you cry. So you want to put those somewhere. I've been putting them in basically a big bucket of water I make my own fertilizer with, and that seems to work because there's no beetles swimming in there, that's for sure. And this, again, we've got even more spears coming up, or really fronds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I mean, this one's going crazy, but it's not quite as established as the other plant over there, so that's something to keep in mind. And if you're wondering about why I look like I'm in jail here with all of these green bars, basically as the plants grew, I did realize they needed a little bit of support because we get strong winds that blow everything over, and I'll run string or something like that, probably like the rubber covered metal that is pretty soft on plants. I'll run that all the way around so that when they grow up, they can't fall over. So it's the first day of spring, unfortunately a pretty overcast and chilly day, and I thought we'd have a revisit of the asparagus. And basically one of the big questions in my mind originally was crowns versus seedlings. I think one of the quite good pieces of advice that I later saw after everyone recommended crowns was Jack from Epic Gardening saying, just grab the seedlings. It's really not going to make that much of a difference, which is something that at this stage I'm kind of agreeing with. As you can see here, this behind me is basically the potted asparagus that we found at a local nursery, so obviously something very much suited to the local environment here. It has gone the best out of everything. And it probably was because it was in a decent sized pot, and it was probably quite an established crown, realistically speaking. However, with that being said, our two seedlings have gone really, really well. And while this one here is meant to be a purple asparagus seedling, can't really tell the difference between the two of them. They look exactly the same. So the green and the purple, they look exactly the same. They've come up quite well. Obviously in the last kind of week is where we've seen some basically new ferns come up. The seedlings, they're still putting up very much small spears, not that you'd eat at all, and they have turned straight into ferns. When we look at our more established plant here, which was just bought locally, it has put spears up, these quite big spears now, but they are turning into ferns quite rapidly as well. And the interesting thing is, my 2 crowns that I bought on eBay from within the state, so you would think maybe a similar kind of situation, they have not shown any action. And so I'm hoping they're alive. And obviously the first day of spring, there's probably a little bit of time to wait. But when we're really looking at kind of the performance of these, I would probably say the safest bet is those seedlings. They've done well. They haven't been quite as tall as the crowns. However, they've been super, super dense. They've done really well. They seem to have acclimatized to this location really well as well. And as comparison to buying some crowns from who knows where within the state, they just have performed better. In comparison, if you can buy from like a trusted local seller who is growing in exactly the same conditions you are, and you're getting really, really good crowns, I'd say we can see the advantage here. And if I'd really wanted to, like we could grab this spear here and probably eat it. But again, I'm really like leaving these to just get the best start in life they can, because I do think that's pretty important. And so it puts to rest, in my mind, the argument of crowns versus seedlings. I don't think it really matters that much. However, I am in very, very mild conditions. So I'm in the subtropics. It's quite warm. The one thing that I do think may have affected those crowns towards the back of the garden bed is most of the sun comes across here, and it's possible that the soil is just that little bit warmer on this side of the bed and even on that back corner. And so perhaps that is why our seedlings have done a little bit better. They were also planted a little bit closer to the edge, where the crowns over the back there have been brought in a bit. That's the only thing I can really think of that might be a point of difference. And I'm just really hoping they haven't kind of rotted under the ground or anything like that, because there's probably better drainage towards the front of the bed as well. But I would imagine the drainage here is pretty good all the way through. So the big takeaway, just go out and buy something, get it in the ground, obviously pick your spot, and I think you're gonna have plenty of fun. While this is a long-term kind of investment, and it's probably gonna be a couple of years till you're actually eating your spears, unless you're really impatient and you're happy to kind of trade off a bit of the success of the plant in the early stages for a couple of spears early on. Yeah, I just get into it as quickly as possible, because obviously it's like with a fruit tree. The sooner you get it in, the sooner you're going to be getting fruit, and you're going to be really, really excited. But that is a year or 2 or 3 down the track.